Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Factions of Freedom. I'm your host, Noisera, Freedom Faction, whichever one you prefer, and I have titled this episode, Bilderberg in Action, American Death Cult, and Fangs of Globalism. Why? We're going to be bringing up Bill Gates' COPSEC formula, as well as Bilderberg 2019 Fed book, getting involved in cryptocurrency, as well as the growing immigration invasion that's happening on our border. Medical tyranny is taking place all over, with the talk of abortion, euthanasia, and so much more sweeping through our country. Netflix promised Georgia it'll leave if they protect those babies. We have a lot of different things going on in this episode, and we try to do our best consolidating it for you good people. But before we start the episode, a few quick updates. Obviously, we're shutting down for Season 8. I hope you guys are paying attention to all the amazing work we're trying to get out to you before we have to shut down. Yeah, that's right. Sometimes I have to sleep, believe it or not. Make sure you check out the link in the description bar below to listen to the transmission with Ezekiel Reyes of Black Sun Organite, as well as the previous episode that we did with Josh of Laws of Reality. Also, with things being so chaotic, I haven't had a proper time to announce the Paranormal Perspective Volume 7. And I'm also going to encourage you guys to download episodes as we are clearing seasons 5 through 7 off to make room for the oncoming seasons. Lastly, if you guys want to support the operation, you want to see us get better, think about becoming a Patreon exclusive member. We have all kinds of different tier programs to help make sure you get the content and also create that synergistic relationship between the two of us. And with that being said, let's start the show. Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Factions of Freedom. And guess what? By myself. That's right, we don't have a guest. Believe it or not, we were slated to have one, but as fate would have it, something popped up. But I also think that this is the crazy twist of fate. The day that we are recording is also the day that Bilderberg is meeting in Switzerland. We'll be getting into that, because I think it's important that we also highlight all the other background events that are going on. You know, we had the release of the Mueller Report, and as I told you guys before, it was a huge flop. I'm not interested in it, but I think it does show that there is indeed a deep state or a secular part within the government that is doing nefarious, corrupt things. We don't pay much attention to that, but we have all kinds of other events to talk about throughout the entirety of this show. Now, before I do so, I want to remind you guys that we have one or two more episodes for the season. After that, you know, we got to get rid of seasons 5 through 6. There's a 5 through 7. We have to get rid of seasons so that we can make space for all the other episodes that we're going to put out there. It's crazy because I did not think that we would be going this far, but I suppose that's what happens whenever you stay in this fight. You know, we're coming up on summer. We're coming up on another season of so many different things happening, not only within America, but across the world, that it blows my mind. You know, I wanted to think about one of the central things that we had conquered within Season 7, and I think it was the fact that we could understand ourselves a little bit deeper in relation to everything that's going on, the contextual spirit that is presiding over everything. You know, we have so many different chaotic things happening. I think that's why so many people are tuning off. But for those that are tuned in, you know, it is not only fascinating, but it's also scary, it's crazy, it's hopeful, it's so much that it just animates you in so many different types of ways. You know, we'll be getting into the American death cult that I believe is taking over America, but I spoke about this, you know, months in advance ago, towards the start of 2019, how, you know, evil is evolving and righteousness must rise to meet it. My alliteration, I have to create those types of things to remember it because it's appropriate. And it is imperative that we understand it. You know, you have to think about the times that we are in. Think about what we're listening to, what we're perceiving, what we're talking about. You know, I'll try to say a few more things and then we'll get started with the show. You know, with the minicast and the Instagram lives that I've been doing with you guys, it's allowed for me to show you a little bit more of who I am behind the scenes and speak to you, the audience, directly. You know, eventually I want to get a call-in system feature figured out to where we can do it Instagram live and you guys call in with that. But this is part of the expansion. You know, I'm already thinking about things for season 9 as we're shutting down for season 8. And so it's a very, very interesting mindset trying to switch that up. trying to shut down one chapter while you're already working on another. And with this particular season, I want to say this and then I'll wrap it up. With this particular season, I definitely think we understood the divinity within humanity more. We explain that in so many different ways. And I think that, to me, is important. You know, we're not talking about the hyper-militarization of police. We're not talking about domestic terrorism as much as we should be. We're not talking about corrupt government officials. We're not even talking about the Satanism as well, even though we are, because it's plain day. But you get my point, gang. It's all hands on deck. This is why we have so many guests on. This is why we're posting so much. This is why we're trying to essentially invade every other platform that's out there to get this message, because we are growing, and it is thanks to your guys' continued support of sharing with the articles, sharing the episodes, sharing the videos, and just doing it, really commenting, and so much that we really are able to do it. So I guess that's the best way for me to say thank you guys, and let's start the show. As I said before, we will be having a guest on in the next episode, and possibly one more to finish out the season, and that's it. We got to close it out. But as fate would have it, and I think this is just crazy how sometimes things work. You know, we were supposed to have a guest on today, but the day that we're recording, May 30th, is also the day that Bilderberg 2019 is occurring. Now, for people who are unfamiliar with Bilderberg, you remember whenever, I'm pretty sure you remember the MAGA hat kid, right? The kid with the MAGA hat who was being disrespectful to the Native Americans. That's what the mainstream media told you when it was literally the other way around. Yeah, well, while that was happening, you had world elites meeting in Davos, Switzerland, talking about wealth inequality. How are they going to help the poor get rich? How are they going to manage this stuff? The proletariat, all kinds of different stuff. But you wouldn't know that because the mainstream media didn't report on it. And well, now we have another one of these events, months in advance, actually, where you're having world elites come together to talk about what they're going to do with the world. You know, I keep jokingly talking about this on Instagram Live with you guys. I think it's good to get it over here too. But they created a new Illuminati right in front of you. You know, we always used to joke about how they could never rule the world. There's not a bunch of people in the back room someplace organizing how they're going to control and take over the world. Well, yeah, they do. Yeah, it's called Facebook. It's called Twitter. You know, these are now the public forums. These are now the public squares where people debate things, discuss things, share things. This is this is the brain, the collective consciousness of the so-called of this world right now, of modern humanity. And so they're cultivating thoughts, they're curating ideas, and so much more. But people can't think about that as the Illuminati. No. They don't think about where these people get their funding, where they get their influence, why they're allowed to act this way. No, they can't ever contemplate these types of things. But I digress. That's why we're here. The day that we're recording this, May 30th, 2019, is where they're having the secretive Bilderberg meeting. It's being held and confirmed to take place at the Hotel Montreux Palace in the Swiss town of Montreux from Thursday to Sunday. It will feature Swiss Finance Minister Ulle Maurer, French Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire, the head of Germany's Christian Democrats Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, and Credit Suisse CEO Time, and among others. Wow, okay. According to Swiss daily Tages, Anzeiger, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will also be among the attendees, although he is not on the official guest list on the Bilderberg website. The Swiss paper reports that Pompeo is set to sit down with Ulle Maurer. The two are tipped to discuss the situation in Iran, where Switzerland represents U.S. interests. However, the Swiss Finance Ministry told the local on Tuesday that no meeting was envisaged between Pompeo and Maurer. The yearly Bilderberg Talk Fest, which dates back to 1954, features a guest list of around 130 people from Europe and North America, including everyone from royals to business tycoons and academics. A highly secretive affair without a fixed agenda, the Bilderberg meeting is a regular fodder for conspiracy theorists who believe its participants act as a secret world government. However, organizers argue the private nature of the event gives attendees the chance to hold informal discussions about the major issues and topics that they're going to be discussing today. It's not a conspiracy theory. Whenever these people are literally talking about these types of things, it's 11 talk points. Okay, are you ready? 11 topics. 1. A stable strategic global or a stable strategic order. 2. What's next for Europe? 3. Climate change and sustainability. 4. Russia. 5. China. 6. The future of capitalism. 7. Brexit. 8. Ethics of artificial intelligence. 9. The weaponization of social media. 10. The importance of space. And 11. Cyber threats. Now, what I will have to do in the future is do a whole separate transmission on just this alone and what it means for what they're trying to shape the entirety of the future for. You see, there's no way that I could cover it in its entirety right now in this one. But I think the best way to fly through it really is to say, I've been asking people recently this, if globalism is underneath such a threat, what will replace it? If you have nationalism, which is the far right, and then globalism, which is the far left, well, we all know that we won't be pulled to these extremes. What will we be pulled to in the middle? The centralist, regionalized ideology. You see, and they've talked about it before, a multipolar world order. I think it's called regionalism. I think regionalism will replace globalism because we do see it being brought up in discussion, and we see all kinds of different things taking place. And if we have time, I'll talk about Los Angeles' new Green Deal as well. They, too, have adopted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, and they're trying to commit to all kinds of different, essentially, United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals for the United Nations Agenda 2030. And this is what I mean by regionalism, seeing different parts of the country adopt this globalist ideology. But 2, right here, what's next for Europe? So as we see with Europe, we've noticed that everything that kind of takes place in Europe has like a 4 or 5 year incubation period before it begins to show itself over here. In America, look at what's going on with the immigration invasion there. Look at what's going on with the EU, how it's in trouble, and so much more. If they can figure out how to control Europe, they can figure out how to replicate it across the world. This will play in part 2 with things like climate change, which is the next one. 3, climate change and sustainability. We'll be talking about that later on in the show as well, because precisely it is just that, UN Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, climate change and sustainability, the Green New Deal, the Green Agenda. How can they implement this and get the world on board? 4, China. Clearly, they are a rising threat in so many ways. And we've documented that here on the show, how much money they're giving out there. Look at what they're doing in Venezuela. They're giving actual humanitarian supplies and aid to the Venezuelans instead of just guns and rocket launchers like America would. And they're investing, air quotes, I forget how much it is. It's like $3 billion to Africa with no strings attached. So there's a lot of different things going on with China. Look at the social credit score system. They're building up arms. You name it. 5, Russia. Yes, they're not as much of a threat, and I think that might be the problem, is that they want to figure out how to take over Russia. You kind of see Russia in the background getting itself prepared for some kind of armed conflict, but we really haven't been. I personally, I've not been paying that much attention to Russia because I've been seeing the growing Chinese threat. 6, the future of capitalism. This, if you ask me, is very important because essentially what we're talking about to a degree is the socioeconomic reformation, this global communist socialist agenda that's being pushed by the United Nations, where I talk about it all the time, where we're being lowered to a third world status. The future of capitalism is very important because they don't want people to buck the system. They don't want people to have their ideology or have individual ways of financing themselves. This is why they're practicing vertical integration. This is why you have Google amassing so much power and so much more. 7, Brexit. What can be said about that? After the devastating votes and what Nigel Farage is doing, people are becoming aware of things like the EU, how there is a globalist factor to it, and how they want to actually govern themselves. But this too ties into what I was talking about with regionalism. 8, the ethics of artificial intelligence. Now we see this growing in so many different ways. We talk about it in our Autonomous Society series, in our Building the Matrix series. And we talk about it all the time in relation to the automation that is taking place, the post-industrial revolution. What will happen whenever machines take over? What will happen whenever society has become effectively automated? I mean, we don't really integrate with people these days. We don't really discuss our problems with actual individuals. It's usually taking place through some kind of interface. The ethics of AI, you have them dumbing down society to essentially interface with generic intelligence, with things that are with machine learning. And so I'm like, I have to do a whole separate transmission on this, really. I'm just kind of flying through it as I can. Right here, 9, the weaponization of social media. Now, this is a huge reason as to why it's important that we look at what's going to take place in the future. Mark Zuckerberg himself has talked about how he is going to begin, I think, working with either the Department of Defense or another agency on trying to curtail hate speech. Now, we'll be talking about predictive policing and pre-crime, real-time crime tracking, and all this other stuff. The weaponization of social media is extraordinarily real. Even being able to have an operation such as our own, where we can post about these types of things and get this information out to the masses on a consistent basis, they would consider that a weapon. They're already targeting people like Candace Owens as hate agents. You know, we talk all the time about deplatforming and unpersoning, the mark of the beast of the system rearing its ugly head. 10, the importance of space. And I know we have some flat earthers that pay attention. I hope, we don't trigger you with the talk of things like the military industrial complex, the Pentagon admitting, I think this week and last week, that they are interested in UFOs. And this is something we could talk about for days. But what we're really talking about is truly the weaponization of space, the Space Force, the Space Corps, getting off planet and making that breakaway civilization. Soft forms of disclosure. They already have the technology. Now they're just slowly rolling it out. Lastly, cyber threats. We talk all the time about EMP attacks and these things that could happen to where they shut down the power grid. I mean, I think it's Boston right now that's going through some crazy cyber attack to where they're being ransomed. There's a lot of stuff going on here in America, for sure, but also around the entire world that shows that indeed we're moving more toward this not chaotic future, but a controlled one, at best. One that eliminates independence, ideology, and just independent thought. So yeah, like I said, I may do a separate transmission on Bilderberg 2019 that is taking place right now to show you guys how they are curtailing consciousness, how they are manipulating your thought process, manipulating your mentality, and doing all kinds of other things to do that, to shape up the world. I mean, like I said before, and I've been saying basically all May, 1984 turned 70 this month, and look at how we're living in the reality. And with that being said, let me transition over here into our next article. Global Coin. Facebook is aiming to launch its own payments-focused cryptocurrency in 2020. So think about that. Remember, and for our hardcore listeners, I've talked about this jokingly years ago, how crazy would it be, with things like universal basic income, the mark of the beast style system, this free money idea you see these democratic socialists pushing. How crazy would it be for you to have a Facebook account, but then for them to pay you to see ads? Well, it seems like Facebook is coming out with its own type of feature with that. Let's get in this article. It's from Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge. We put this up May 24th. It says social media giant Facebook plans to launch its own payments-focused cryptocurrency, Global Coin, in 2020, according to a BBC News report published on May 24th. The BBC reports that the tests for the forthcoming digital currency are planned to take place by the end of 2019. While Global Coin is ostensibly the coin's current name within the company, it has not been confirmed that it will retain the same name once development of the project is completed. According to the BBC, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg met Bank of England Governor Mark Carney last month to discuss prospects and risks involved in its cryptocurrency launch. Aside from this, the firm has reportedly consulted with United States Treasury officials on operational and regulatory matters, in particular in regard to identity checks procedures and mitigating money laundering risks, the BBC claims. The report also refers to Facebook's ongoing discussion with global payment service provider Western Union, reportedly as part of its research in providing affordable access to money transfer service for the unbanked. The social media giant's forthcoming native current cryptocurrency will purportedly seek to disrupt or altogether bypass banking networks in order to remove financial barriers and lessen consumer costs. To realize its crypto payment network, the company will need to cooperate with banks and brokers worldwide to access currency exchange services and fiat on ramping, the BBC notes. This is ostensibly the motivation behind its newly created financial tech firm, Libra Networks, LLC, which was registered in Geneva earlier this month. As reported, rumors of Facebook's plans to integrate a cryptocurrency for WhatsApp users first surfaced in December of 2018. Further alleged details of the highly secretive project emerged this February, with sources claiming that the forthcoming crypto will be a fiat-pegged stablecoin. So essentially what they're saying is, hey, Facebook is getting involved in the cryptocurrency world. They're telling you that they're going to start making their own money. That they're going to start, gaming the system. So there it is. Facebook's getting involved in cryptocurrency. As edgy as it is, they're getting involved in Bitcoin. Fedbook coin. Now, what happens whenever Facebook becomes like mandatory and they can see all of your payments? I mean, they're already kicking people off. We've talked about it. We've talked about it a few weeks ago. How MasterCard is removing people who don't share, who apparently don't share their online views. What happens whenever you're unable to have a Facebook account and process this type of stuff? I mean, look at what's going on in China. They are stopping people from being able to have access to housing, education, loans, travel. I wonder how long these people are going to be until they starve to death. You see, this is the rise of the cashless society. This is whenever they want to make sure everything is online. But that's dangerous, if you ask me. Extraordinarily dangerous, because we're giving over our independence and our freedom to Big Brother, to Fedbook. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on about the dangers of Facebook. How they're tied into DARPA, how former head of DARPA, Regina Dugan, she's now working for Building 8, Facebook's secretive mind control technology facility. That's the easiest way to describe it. And what I'm really trying to say is now these people are working on ways to incorporate predictive policing and how it could be, how it would be used to see innocent citizens framed. Now, think about hate speech. Think about, and we've talked about this years ago with citizen threat ranking. Now they call it your social credit score. Predictive policing is just the same thing. They want to be able to stop people before they even do things. Don't worry about the different dimensions that they could take, the different types of paths that they could take, the different choices that they have available. No, they've run the calculations. They've seen your Facebook posts. They see your purchase records. They see who you're connecting with. And through their technological crystal ball, through their black mirror, they have identified you as a threat. Now think about how dangerous this is. You see, this is why we need to stop getting upset about race and literally look at how there is a technotronic elite trying to control and curtail the future. I talked about this specifically with Josh of Laws of Reality and how important choice is and conscious action is. It's staying true to our word, because these people are using that technological crystal ball, that black mirror, to literally divine the future. But let me get into this article. We put this up May 27th. It's by Drudge Report Feed. It says predictive policing could see innocent citizens framed. The sci-fi movie Minority Report was set in a world in which police arrested people for crimes that they were only predicted and not committed. But now real life is emulating fiction, according to a campaign group, Liberty. A report by Liberty called, quote, Policing by Machine, reveals the widespread use of biased, quote, predictive policing that claims threatens everyone's rights and freedoms. The report collates 90 freedom of information requests sent to every force in the UK. Predictive policing computer programs use algorithms to analyze huge amounts of data, of police data, to identify patterns and make predictions about crime. Now, hold on. What did I just talk about a few weeks ago before we had our previous guest on? How in France they were saying, oh, well, we want to stop terrorist radicalization. And then I did the whole breakdown where I looked at what WebMD called ODD, Opposition Defiance Disorder. hate speech. These ambiguous terms. You see, do you see? That's what I'm trying to talk about with predictive policing and pre-crime, to where they can just come up with some kind of created illness. I mean, they took transgenderism off of the mental illness category here in not here in America, but on the World Health Organization list. But they put gaming as a mental illness up on the World Health Organization list. So they can come up and change it all the time, but at the same time enforce these corrupt, vague, ambiguous laws. That's why this stuff is so dangerous, you see. Because it's not that you actually committed these things. They just ran some algorithms and some formulas, and they said, well, he might. So they went ahead and acted on suspicion. But let me get back into this article. It says, these programs also, quote, learn over time and become more autonomous when making predictions without having to be programmed. There are two types of predictive policing. There are two types of predictive policing, predictive mapping programs and individual risk assessment programs. Predictive mapping programs use police data about past arrests to identify, quote, hotspots of high risks, and police are then directed to patrol the areas. But Liberty says these tend to be areas that already experience, quote, over-policing. Hannah Couchman, policemen and campaign officers at Liberty, told Daily Star Online, quote, it's not the case that over-policing is a response to higher crime levels. It's that police resources are being disproportionately focused on certain areas and certain groups. For example, stop and search powers are disproportionately deployed against people from BAM communities. I'm not sure what BAME communities. I'm not sure what that is. BAME. Quote, this biased approach to policing is also reflected in the data collected by police, and this influences future strategy. Individual risk assessment programs use data to predict how a person will behave and even whether they are likely to commit or be victim to certain crimes. Predictive mapping feeds off of historical crime data, and this doesn't present a true picture of where crime is happening. Liberty says it simply presents a biased picture of how police have been responding to crimes and people from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. Oh, okay, that's what they mean by BAME. Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities are disproportionately more likely to be arrested. This leads the program to assume that the areas where they live or spend have more crime. So essentially they're saying, hey, look, you're probably going to commit crimes. We're just going to lock you up. I hate to say it, but we're just going to lock you up. And this is, strangely enough, this is something I find myself having to talk about, I suppose privately, and now I guess publicly. I could have just been, every other black guy out here in America. And I worry about that because look at the protocol these days with how the cops handle people. I'm a very real target because I'm right in your face, I'm not a coward, and I'll tell you how I feel. And there's a lot of cowards that don't like that. And so they'll shoot me saying they feel fearful for their lives. So how come that doesn't get entered into the predictive policing factor? I mean, whenever they send these people out. But my point is this, when we're talking about Bilderberg in action, Fedbook's global coin, what's going on with reality, the cashless society. This is the autonomous society. This is 1984. This is beyond 1984. This is the New World Order, the technocracy, the scientific dictatorship. When I'm trying to lay out for you all the different tools at these people's disposals, you have to understand their intention is to rob you of the power of your choice. That's why I tried to hammer it on with our guest, where I said that's the key. That's what it's about. If they rob you of your choice in this automated society, you cannot be the buck in the system that's required to restart the light within people. But if these people already predict you as like some kind of criminal, how far off do you think we are from thought crime? Like, how far off do you think we are really from, hey, you're not allowed to talk about that, you're not allowed to say these things? Or is that where we already are? I mean, like with half of the things that people deal with today, and I was talking about this the other day with somebody, the current justice system. You could go to jail for saying you're going to kick some guy's butt who said you could go to jail for kicking a guy's butt after he said he was going to kick your butt. That's how clown world inverted all this stuff is. But they have to make all of this lawlessness and this stuff ambiguous so that they can operate as a secret police in the background, cultivating things. But that's another discussion for another day. Speaking of past, present, and future threats and I think this is a good way for us to kind of close out this segment. Julian Assange has been hospitalized. He has been, there are reports saying that he can't hold a normal conversation and that essentially he's gravely ill. Right here, this is from Caitlin Johnstone via Medium.com. It was reported over here at Zero Hedge. It says Assange is reportedly gravely ill and hardly anyone's talking about it. Julian Assange's Swedish lawyer, Per Samuelsson, has told the press that, quote, Assange's health situation on Friday was such that it was not possible to conduct a normal conversation with him. Now, before I get into this article, and we also have it reported over here at Your Newswire by Baxter Dimitri, he says that Julian Assange is hospitalized, can't hold a normal conversation. Before I get into this article, let me say why this is important following pre-crime, following future crime, predictive analysis, citizen threat ranking, the social credit score system, the mark of the beast, and all this stuff. Remember, for people who think that this is just I'm some Johnny-come-lately, right? Remember, I think it's like back in 2013, 2014, I forget when, but Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act. I think it was 2012 to be precise, now that I think about it. He signed it on Christmas or on New Year's, some holiday. And in that actual National Defense Authorization Act, he talked about indefinitely detaining journalists. And for me, a researcher at the time, we're talking 7 years ago now, I freaked out. Because what you're saying is, hey, if you ask questions and you report on this stuff and you ask the public about this stuff, we're going to detain you. Fast forward to right now. What's happening to Julian Assange? That's why all this pre-crime stuff is happening too. They could, judge, jury, and executioner, they could go out there and kidnap you, lock you up, and then boom, we would never hear a thing of you again. You know, I forget, the name escapes me right now. Actually, it doesn't. It's Pete Santilli. The same thing happened with him in the Bundy Ranch. It's the criminalization of the truth that I have an issue with, and with Julian Assange essentially being treated this way, not respected, the mainstream media finally catching on what this means for them. What is happening in the free press here in the world? What happens whenever we're not beginning to take care of the people who took care of us? But let me get into this article right here so we can get this on record. The status of Julian Assange. And we put this up May 29th. It says WikiLeaks editor Julian Assange has been admitted to the hospital in a serious condition, according to his lawyer, who says Assange's health has deteriorated rapidly and he is barely able to communicate. Yeah, that would happen if you were in his condition for as long as he was. Assange's Swedish lawyer, Per E. Samuelsson, visited Assange in Belmarsh prison last week, and he says he is very weak and unable to hold a normal conversation. In a letter to Uppsala District Court, Samuelsson said that he met Assange for just under 2 hours. According to the lawyer, quote, Assange is in such a bad shape that it is not possible to conduct a normal conversation with him. Assange is said to have been taken to the Belmarsh prison hospital ward, according to the Swedish reports, but there is no more detailed information about his state of health. Assange's health deteriorated during his 7-year residency at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he was denied medical care while being held in what the UN Human Rights Commission ruled was, quote, arbitrary detention. The U.S. Department of Justice announced last week that there are 17 new charges against Assange. According to the DOJ, Assange illegally disclosed names and confidential sources and violated the espionage law. If found guilty, the WikiLeaks editor could face up to 170 years behind bars. According to Julian Assange's lawyer, the charges of espionage are a, quote, threat to all journalists and the free press. The new charges come a month's time after the Ministry of Justice published a slightly smaller case against Assange, in that he is accused by the United States of publishing through WikiLeaks large amounts of confidential U.S. documents about the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Assange was arrested on April 11th at the Ecuador's embassy by British police. He had stayed at the embassy for almost 7 years. So yeah, your health would deteriorate if you were stuck in some place for 7 years, and that's dangerous. That's crazy to me. You see, so this is what I mean. They're criminalizing contemplation. They're destroying the truth. They're running it all over the place, and it's a mess. It truly is a mess. This is what I mean by Bilderberg in action. So to close this out, I guess to kind of, I know this is going to sound weird. I guess I have a sick sense of humor. But to close this session out, we're going to close it out with Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Britain, crying as she's leaving one hell of a mess behind. She's resigning after her defeat with Brexit. Let's get this up for you guys.
Not just a family of 4 nations, but a union of people, all of us. Whatever our background, the colour of our skin, or who we love, we stand together, and together we have a great future. Our politics may be under strain, but there is so much that is good about this country, so much to be proud of, so much to be optimistic about. I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
And she walks off, crying. Anyway, they say Boris Johnson might take her place, but we will keep an eye on that. Good job to the people out there in the UK. This is a huge strike against the globalist, because essentially what we're seeing right now is a resurgence in patriotism, a resurgence where people care about what's going on in their country. Where I talked about us going through a reboot as if we are becoming a whole new America. That's sweeping the entire globe. I mean, look at what's going on in France. We're fighting for the very identity of our nations and fighting for culture, fighting for history, and fighting for so much more. So Theresa May, we'll catch you later. I'm curious to see who comes up after that. So yeah, this is geopolitics. This is the world. This is the new world order. This is what I mean by with nationalism, globalism, transforming into some kind of regionalism to where we discuss these types of things and more. But we will see what that looks like in the future. However, gang, what's going to happen now is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about this American death cult. You know, doctors pushing to legalize euthanasia against mentally ill patients, Alabama wanting to end marriages, designer babies, artificial wombs, destroying a nuclear family, and so much more. Crazy and chaotic times is where we find ourselves. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. Salutations, my friends. Have you heard of Shilajit? Well, to be quite honest, neither had I. But then I started doing some research and I found out that it was part of the Hindu Ayurvedic system of medicine, and for hundreds of years since its discovery, it's had the potential to help people live a healthy and balanced life. Here, let me read off some of the benefits for you guys. It increases your energy, boosts your libido, balances your mood, supports healthy aging, decalcifies your pineal gland, and we all understand how important that is, supports healthy brain health. It also helps regulate your hormones. There are so many benefits to taking this that I cannot put them in this single video. You can mix it in with tea. I like to mix it in with my pre-workout in the morning, and be careful, it's going to give you that boost. It's going to give you that energetic boost you need to get through your day. And remember, guys and gals, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noisera, Freedom Faction, out. That's right. Welcome back. You know, I really, and I think what's crazy about this, I just want to say this because I hope you guys realize that we are having to mature, grow, expand, rise in so many different ways. I hope you guys are, getting the Shilajit, getting the CBD oil, becoming exclusive members. We're trying to figure out more ways to create streams and avenues of income so we can expand. Clearly, we have our work cut out for us, but we need to figure out effective ways to combat this. There's so many. I say this all the time. Politics is downwind from culture. Look at the culture that's being promoted out there. We created this broadcast years ago, and look at how much it's done. Look at what it's grown into with your guys' continued support and people just sharing things. Your 2 cents here and there a month ago has influenced so many different people, has brought so many different things to us. It's crazy. I need to do a whole separate thing on it. But what I meant to say, leading into this segment, is you never expect these things until you're literally thrown into the flames, thrown into the wolves, and then you see where you stand. I had said this with Ra, our engineer for Fellowship and Freedom, our secondary show over there on the Wake Up Radio. That's another discussion for another day. But you never really think about who your enemies are. Satanists, Luciferians, cartel members, radical domestic terrorists. At first I don't know what I thought it was, but it wasn't that. And now that I'm in this, I see so many different things developing that it does blow my mind. It fires me up, but it also makes me think about what I chose years ago and what I'm still choosing, and how there is a spirit working through not only the country but the world right now. And that's all that's happening, is we're being refined. Like smelting or copper work or any kind of a metallurgy. We're being refined and tested by the fires. I keep telling people this. The kids that are being born today, they got a mission and a time ahead of them. We have it easy compared to what's coming down the line, and that's all we got to do is hold the line. And what's happening now is we have an American death cult taking over. So all we can do is promote life, promote being genuine, promote being appreciative, promote being gratuitous, promote being divine, promote getting closer to God, promote all the right positive things, not things based in deception and manipulation. I have no time for that. Get that out of me. I digress. I think I definitely missed the mark on where I wanted to come in with this segment. But with that being said, let's start this one where we're talking about the American death cult. The growing death cult here with medical freedom, medical tyranny, and how, it's being disguised, if you ask me. We talk about it all the time, how we're politicking with the devil. Where did you guys think it was going to end? I thought about this the other day when I was trying to get all this stuff together. The vaccine issue, it seems so trivial as compared to what we're discussing now. The idea of what's in the vaccines, it seems so trivial compared to the idea of abortions. I'll tell you where I think we're going to go from here. Genital mutilation, gender reassignment. That was that was a few months ago. Like where the vaccine issue seems so small and trivial compared to all the chaos they are throwing at us now, and trying to understand it, or at least trying to break it down. To me, it's crazy. It truly is crazy. But let's get into some of these articles. And this is some of the stuff that blows my mind. Now, whenever we are having this discussion about euthanasia, abortion, end-of-life care, what this really truly does mean for society, we're essentially embracing the idea of Bill Gates' CopSec. If we have time, I'll try to get that video up for you guys. But right here, from a news source, let me get this up for you guys. Hold on. Let me get this up for you guys. Our news source, lifenews.com. This is by Michael Cook. We put this up May 24th. It says, doctor pushes campaign to legalize euthanizing mentally ill patients. So think about that. Where did you really think abortion was going to lead? Where did you think not being able to protect your child's bodily innocence, your child's temple, where do you think that was going to lead? As I said before in the previous segment with the predictive police and citizen threat ranking and all these different types of things, what happens whenever they say they're going to euthanize people who were born with Down syndrome, people who have autism spectrum, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, who have any of these types of illnesses, air quotes, diseases, air quotes, mental handicaps, air quotes, that they want to rid society of. You see, it's like a techno-medical version of what the Spartans used to do, where they would get rid of defective babies and throw them off of cliffs. These days, they're just trying to politic with you as far as what constitutes as life and what constitutes as a child being mentally sane. But let me get into this article. It says Belgium's leading advocate for euthanasia liberalization is campaigning vigorously for euthanasia for people with dementia. According to the current euthanasia law, patients are only eligible if they are fully aware and competent. This can lead to distressing situations and must change, says Professor Wim Distelmans. Distelmans is the chairman of Belgium's chairman of Distelmans is the chairman of Belgium's chairman of the Federal Euthanasia Commission, the body which assesses whether euthanasia cases have been carried out legally. But he is also the chairman of LEAF, the Life and Information Forum, Belgium's leading end-of-life lobby. LEAF has organized an online petition which has been signed by scores of well-known academics, journalists, and politicians, as well as thousands of others. LEAF has also posted 3 heart-tugging videos of people with dementia putting the case for euthanasia. Distelmans asks on the LEAF website, quote, "What are they waiting for to give priority to this basic human and patient right on the political agenda? After all, no one is obliged to euthanize or implement it, not even in the proposed amendment to the law. But one can avoid a lot of situations that are considered, quote, degrading by those involved by making the prior directive also applicable to those who suffer from dementia or any other incapacity." However, at the same time, and moving in the opposite direction, the Belgian Medical Association has implemented a far more restrictive policy on euthanasia for psychiatric patients. This is a very significant shift in policy. Some supporters of the country's euthanasia law differ on wisdom of making a liberal law even more liberal. Yeah, before I finish reading this article, essentially, and I'll see if I can pull up this next article for you guys. It's also from Life News, but they want to basically legalize suicide. And I feel like, again, this is something that people do already, but getting the government involved is where it becomes politicized, and this is exactly what we're doing with abortion. People are going to do these types of things, but if you make it to where the government gets involved, people expect it, and then people crave it, and then people go after it. And this is very, very dangerous if you ask me. They're saying they're going to euthanize people with dementia, Alzheimer's, any kind of psychiatric risk. What did we talk about with our previous guest, Josh of Laws of Reality? Look at what's going on with the hardcore legalization of all these types of drugs. This will create a mental health epidemic. So I'm just saying. But continuing on, it says Belgium's euthanasia law says that the treating doctor must seek advice from 2 other doctors, including at least one psychiatrist who is not the treating psychiatrist, but the new guidelines from the Order van Artsen set down from the treating doctor should consult not just one, but 2 independent psychiatrists who should meet face to face to discuss the case. This new standard is far more demanding, This new standard is far more demanding. So essentially what they're trying to say is they're going to get a bunch of doctors together to figure out whether or not they should kill you or euthanize a patient, if they should euthanize an individual, if they should take their life. And this is why this is so dangerous, you see, because essentially what we're talking about is how you no longer have control over your own life. This is what I mean by medical tyranny. I could tell you guys some tales of how they treat people in these end-of-life care facilities. You see, they treat them like garbage. Obviously, they would talk about this type of stuff. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is we're seeing the rise of the should we keep Granny alive or should we kill her? Should we keep these people? Should we give them end-of-life care, or should we just dose them up with a whole bunch of drugs, pharmaceuticals, and then we'll let them die? I was getting together some notes for the weaponizing consciousness expansion transmission that we're doing, right? And in that one, they actually talk about how, and this is documented, how the Aztecs, how they used to prepare their victims with psychedelic mushrooms, and then they would cut their heads off, and then they would drink the blood. They would, and they'd get high off of the adrenochrome, and then they would also get high off of the psilocybin, and and then they would just go into these crazy frenzies. And so I'm not saying that's what's happening right now, that these people are killing them and then getting high off of their blood. But what I am saying is that we're seeing this whole thing resurface. And I'm sure I have people asking, oh, well, you don't want to give old people mushrooms and then shoot them up with morphine or something to kill them? It's like, no, I really feel like that's dangerous because where does it end? You see, whenever we no longer begin to take care of our own family, right, to where we lay grandma down, to where we bury her in our own backyard, to where we talk about this, to where we talk about this type of stuff, to where we expect the state to take care of this type of stuff. Where is it going to end? Because the state is literally pushing to mandate mandate sex education for kindergartners. And I know that's a crazy connection, but I'm trying to say, look at what happens when you give something unilateral control. But what's going to happen now is I'm going to play for you guys a quick clip of Bill Gates essentially talking about population control and reduction in relation to climate change and more. And this is the conversation that we're having now, the case to kill Granny.
Over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses everything: the food we eat, clothing, TV, heating. These are very good things. Getting rid of poverty means providing these services to almost everyone on the planet. And it's a great thing for this number to go up. In the rich world, perhaps the top 1 billion, we probably could cut back and use less. But every year, this number on average is going to go up.
In the next excerpt, you hear Gates explain what he considers to be the single most important thing that he would choose to become a reality in the future time span of 50 years. I'm assuming it's vaccines. It's population control at the end of the day.
So this is a wish. It's a very concrete wish that we invent this technology. If you gave me only one wish for the next 50 years, I can pick who's president, I can pick a vaccine, which is something I love, or I could pick that this thing that's half the cost with no CO2 gets invented. This is the wish I would pick. This is the one with the greatest impact. If we don't get this wish, the division between the people who think short-term and long-term will be terrible, between the US and China, between poor countries and rich, and most of all, the lives of those 2 billion will be far worse.
He was talking about vaccines as the one thing that he had wished. But what I wanted to do right there is how we're talking about consumption versus production, recycling, sustainable development. This is what I mean by the Green New Deal. And another perfect example that happened just this past week that exemplifies this in so many different ways is how now Washington State is allowing human composting. Let's take a listen.
Would you be interested in a sustainable burial? Washington State could soon become the first U.S. state to allow a green burial. According to CNN, Washington State lawmakers have passed a bill to allow human composting. If Governor Jay Inslee decides to sign Senate Bill 5001 into law, it is to take effect on May 1, 2020. Recomposition is the process of turning bodies of deceased humans into soil. Katrina Spade, the CEO of Recomps, a company that wants to build a human composting facility, explained the process to KIRO 7. She said the body is covered in natural materials such as straw or wood chips. Microbes then break down the body into the soil over a period of 3 to 7 weeks. According to the Associated Press, relatives can then choose to keep the soil in urns, use it to plant trees, or spread it on public land in Washington State.
Yeah.
CNN quotes the bill's sponsor, Senator Jamie Peterson, as saying that people should have the freedom. Would you be interested in a...
People should have the freedom to dispose of their remains however they want, but I just think it's crazy still. Where I get this, I know this isn't it, but I still just get this idea of people burying their body for the state, you know. I know people have been doing this forever, you know, scattering their ashes to the north wind, you know, over a beautiful sea and stuff like this. But I feel like allowing it and making it a law and just, you know, getting involved in that type of that mindset, I just feel like it's again dangerous, you know. It's like just submitting yourself to the state. But yeah, no, this is what they mean by a sustainable burial, to where you can be a part of the earth. You can commit your ashes to it. You know, I know people who are going to do this for sure, but what I'm trying to illustrate to you is how this is the growing trend. And I know that I'll have to do another discussion about this another day, but there are also, if you ask me, spiritual aspects to it. You know, look at that movie Avatar, where they bury their elders underneath a tree, and then they recycle that information, but you're just burning your body into the ashes of the earth and then scattering it. You know, and it could be said that that's being used as fertilizer along the way, but I digress. What we're beginning to see is just that, the discussion of resources, and you are chattel, you are the resource that they want to know. And this brings me to my next point right here. Cory Booker announces a plan to create a White House Office of Reproductive Freedom. This is by Sean Walton of the Daily Sheeple. We put this up May 23rd. Now, before I get into this has been my whole, I guess, like conspiracy theory surrounding abortion, surrounding reproductive rights, surrounding all this stuff, population control. I said in the past that in the future, what's going to happen, because they're trying to sterilize us now, they're trying to give us so many different genders, like we're Baskin Robbins times 2. They're trying to do all this stuff regarding reproduction, that in the future, you know, and I say this too with Monsanto, Bayer, the agricultural industry, and how this will make us infertile in so many different ways. You know, the birth rates are declining. I digress. What I'm trying to say is, in the future, they'll have to make sure you're genetically compatible and that you are sound, that you don't have all these diseases, that you can procreate for the betterment of society. I mean, we talked earlier this year and towards the end of last year about the geneticist He Jiankui, who actually went, the Chinese geneticist who went rogue after disclosing to the world that he had created two babies that were resistant to HIV and AIDS. Now, this is what I mean for what they want to set for the future. They want to be able to put children out there who are resistant to autism, are resistant to Down syndrome, are resistant to AIDS, cancer, all these different types of things. They want to create superhumans. They want to create genetically modified children, designer babies, and all the other things. But let me get into this article. We put this up May 23rd. Like I said, it's by Sean Walton of the Daily Sheeple. It says, in what could be seen as a desperate attempt to remain relevant in a field of nearly 24 presidential contenders, Cory Booker released a statement on Tuesday detailing steps that he will take if elected to, quote, advance reproductive rights. According to Booker, Donald Trump and Mike Pence have led an all-out assault on women's rights, and states across the country have followed. Anti-choice governors and lawmakers are relentless in their charge to chip away at abortion rights and are committed to bringing a case to the Supreme Court that would do away with Roe v. Wade for good. Additionally, Booker says that he will not wait for Congress to act, quote, on day one, I will create a White House Office of Reproductive Freedom charged with coordinating and affirmatively advancing abortion rights and access to reproductive health care across my administration. Repeal of the Hyde Amendment is also on his list because abortion care is also health care. Booker is also in favor of forcing healthcare professionals to perform medical procedures that violate their beliefs. The fact that this essentially constitutes slavery seems to be lost on this man who was repeatedly called for slavery reparations. So yeah, he's going to make sure you have rights to do these types of things. And I guess I've gotten to the point where I look at all this type of stuff and I think anytime they say they're going to help me with rights or they're going to help me with freedom, I literally think of it as the opposite. As they're just going to condone it, that they're just going to take it away. That it's like Facebook saying they're going to help combat hate speech when they're just going to delete everybody that they don't agree with. I guess it's the same thing when Ronald Reagan said, "Hello, hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you." Like that's some of the most dangerous words in the English language. And now you have these people talking about reproductive freedom, but they want to make sure that you take out your womb, that you have this God-given gift to just procreate, and they just want to take it out of you and give it to Johnny over there. Tell little Johnny over there, we're going to turn you into Jenny, and we're going to give you a fetus. We're going to give you a womb. We're going to give you genitalia. And this to me is very dangerous because we're seeing this crazy inversion. But even so, look at this to advance the show. To move on to our next point, look at this. Alabama lawmakers now want to eliminate marriage license. So that's great. Hey, that's great, isn't it? Isn't that great? Let's just get rid of marriage. It's just archaic. Millennials don't want to do it. Nobody's doing it. Divorce rates are up. People are having children out of wedlock. Let's just get rid of the kids. How about we all just start having a bunch of sex? Nobody's tied to anybody. Everybody's polyamorous or polygamy, whatever. Nobody's got partners. It's an open relationship for everybody. What do you think that's going to do? Well, scientists have predicted that babies will be born or grown in artificial wombs within 10 years. That's very loud, so I'm just going to read you the title right here. It says, it's designed to replace the womb pregnancy. They're talking about ectogenesis. The see-through pod sits in your living room. Parents would be able to live their lives normally. They're talking about, getting the genes of two parents and then growing a baby. And they can watch the fetus grow in the pod. Ectogenesis. It's a baby in a bag. It's a baby in a tube. It has a dock to insert food, so you can give the baby the nutrients that's needed. There's a microphone so you can speak to the fetus. Tell the baby that you love them so that they still have some kind of human connection. And the product is just an idea at this stage, but give it a few times and I'm sure they'll do it. It's been designed by the students at Arnhem. So is it possible? Yes, it is. Essentially what I'm talking about is the end result of the abortion debate. I guess is what I'm really trying to say. At the end of the day, at the end of the rabbit hole, they want to do away with marriage. They want to be able for everybody to have kids if it's allowed, if you go through the right proper channels. This is what I mean by population control. The Georgia Guidestone has this as well. Living in harmony with the planet. And it starts with things like this. Eliminating marriage licenses. Netflix said that they will leave Georgia if they protect those babies because of their new heartbeat bill. Netflix is like, we're going to take all of our money. So it's like Hollywood can't go over there, but what they'll do is they'll use their subsidiaries or their little minions from Netflix to say, you better drop this bill. And so now essentially Netflix is down for abortion. I think that's crazy. I think what I'm talking about all the time is crazy, but where we're at now is just that. This is what I mean by the American death cult, where you have to have a certain language, you have to have a certain mindset, and if you're not down for it, if you're not essentially down to slit your wrist for the state and say, I love you, please sir, can I have another? You're considered an issue. Where do you think this is going to lead? The crazy thing is China's not promoting any of this type of stuff. What's crazy is they're putting all their money to promote this over here. You do any of this stuff over here in China, they'll kill you. They just legalized gay marriage out there in Taiwan, but they are not as tolerant, as liberal, and as wild as we're being over here in America. They're not as open, and so they're realizing that they can use our openness against us. They can use they can inject all these globalist views through this liberalism that's kind of crazy right now. And I guess I'm freaking out because, again, you have the state, you have politics, I guess, monopolizing or monetizing off of the current depraved culture that we have. And now they're saying, hey, this is more or less an option. And even if it's just introduced into the to the public, it doesn't have to be absorbed by the public. Even if it's introduced to the public, you'll still have fringe sects or marginalized groups of people who will adopt this. And what will happen from there, because we have this crazy runaway media that wants to put a microscope on marginalized groups, is they'll expand and focus on these marginalized groups to try to affect the masses, the weak-willed masses, you see. And so this is very dangerous. What I'm really trying to say is they're going to say, hey, this is good. If you don't want to get married, you don't have to get married. If you don't want to have kids, you don't have to have kids. You can do this instead, but only if you abide by this rule, only if you abide by this law. It's like, hey, you can give up your God-given freedoms. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line, and we'll give you security instead. This is a very, very dangerous slope, if you ask me. But let me get into this article right here. We put this up May 27th. It's by Ricky Scaparo of End Times Headline. It says, Alabama lawmakers now want to eliminate marriage license. Conservative lawmakers are now taking serious aim at marriage law, wasting no time since passing an extreme measure eliminating nearly all abortions in the state. On Friday, the Alabama legislature sent a Republican-backed measure to the desk of Governor Kay Ivey. That would aid officials who oppose same-sex marriage. Under existing state law, couples are required to obtain a marriage license from a probate judge and hold a ceremony to solemnize the union. If Ivey signs the measures introduced by State Senator Greg Albritton, the solemnization requirement would be eliminated, and it would become the responsibility of couples themselves to record their own union. Probate judges would simply be required to pass those records along to a state police and could not reject any marriage for which all paperwork is in order. That means judges who personally oppose same-sex marriage would be able to distance themselves from such unions. In Alabama, some probate judges stopped issuing marriage license altogether after the Supreme Court's 2015 marriage equality ruling because the judges did not want to be forced to issue licenses to same-sex couples that meant that some Alabama couples are required to travel to other counties to obtain a license. The bill would also allow everybody in the state now to go to their local courthouse or wherever to adhere to the law for marriages without traveling somewhere else. Al Brighton to AL.com, a local news site. You guys can go check this out there. Essentially what they're saying is they're getting rid of all the legalese surrounding it. Now, I want to say this to I guess just kind of clear the air. And I keep briefly touching on this and alluding towards it with the LGBTQP movement that is taking place. With the ideology of the symbol, or the symbol with the rainbow, the elimination of the marriage, of the unity, the covenant with God, essentially, how they're destroying the church, destroying the nuclear family. And a lot of you guys ask me Instagram questions about this, and why is that happening? Why is that so important? What did I just go on and on about? They want you to have all kinds of sex, lust after everything, be carnal, corporeal here in the flesh. They don't want you to love. They don't want you to form actual bonds with people. They want you to be sterile so you can have as much sex as you want. They don't want you to procreate. And if you do, they want to give your kid 17 million different shots. Like, think about what's going on right now. This is this new world order where they want to promote pleasure, power, lust, love, absent-mindedness. This is what I mean by the termination of your legacy. You see, I discussed this more so and I think I might do a separate transmission on this where I really boil this down and write it out maybe, but where they want to replace masculinity with the state. Where everybody can be in this state of arrested development or extended adolescence, to where they don't have to grow up, to where we can forever be children, as long as we don't ever upset the state, as long as we never get that whiplash from our father who are in Washington. You see, the ideology right now is to emasculate men, effeminize men, turn us into cucks, and at the same time, I don't want to even say make women masculine, because what they're doing now is just that. With this fourth wave feminism, they're essentially telling women that they are men. It truly is crazy where all of this is going, and it's all agenda driven. And I think what's even more wild is the fact that people can't see it, and the ultimate end goal is just that, for us to stop all of this. You see, so this is to me really, really dangerous, and I guess worrisome to see, because you also hear this talking point being put out there to where they're saying the future is female. The future is female. The future is female. So what does this mean for men? What does this mean for individuals like myself? I worry about that. Let me read this article to you guys, and then we'll wrap this segment up. But I think that this is, again, just to get this on record while we're talking about all this type of stuff, Netflix essentially endorses abortion right here. Netflix backs lawsuit overturning a Georgia abortion ban. It will leave the state if babies are protected. This is by Stephen Ertlet of LifeNews.com. We put this up May 28th. It says the online media giant Netflix may move out of Georgia if the state succeeds in protecting unborn babies from abortion. So if you have Netflix, I don't know why I should be surprised with shows like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which we have yet to do Illuminati Exposed on. I don't know why I would be surprised that Netflix wants to see abortions. With as many dark shows that are coming out on Netflix these days, I don't understand why I would be surprised that they would be like, no, you better kill those babies. You better be about it. This is a very, very slippery slope. And you have people who are just going to gobble it up. Let me get into this article. On Tuesday, Netflix Chief Content Officer Ted Sarandos said the company supports a legal challenge against Georgia's new heartbeat law. WTHR News 13 reports, quote, if the courts allow Georgia to enforce the law, however, Netflix may stop its productions there, Sarandos said. Quote, we have many women working on productions in Georgia whose rights, along with millions of others, will be severely restricted by this law, Sarandos said in a statement to CNBC. He said the company is working with the ACLU and other abortion advocacy groups to fight the law. Quote, given the legislation has not yet been implemented, we'll continue to film there, while also supporting partners and artists who choose not to. Should it ever come into effect, we'd rethink our entire investment in Georgia, he said. Netflix would be the first major filming group to boycott the pro-life state, Fox Business reports. Actress Alyssa Milano has been pushing for a boycott for months, but until now, only a small film and TV projects have stopped working there. So think about that. You have things like The Haunting of Hill House, Stranger Things, Queer Eye, Ozark, and all kinds of other things that would stop working if House Bill 481 went into law. They don't want people to have kids. They want you, and this is a crazy revelation that I just got right now. It's trendy to not want kids right now. You have to make a choice. Do you want Netflix or do you want kids? Do you want to perpetuate the Netflix agenda, or do you want to create your own agenda? I think that's a crazy thing to think about. There's so many different symbols and so many different things, agendas at work right now that the people are being programmed. And I'll talk about this more so in the next segment with you guys, how a lot of people are going through a rapid radicalization process. The mindset that I have now, it's come from doing this for too many years. What's happening now to people is they're going through a rapid radicalization process to where they're learning things, they're going through stuff, they're having their opinions changed and manufactured all the time. They don't know where they're going next. They don't know what the truth is. They're caught up in the hurricane. As Donald Trump said, this is the eye of the storm. And this is what I mean by that rapid radicalization. Look at how many people are becoming domestic terrorists. Look at how many people are literally triggered over colors, hats, logos, and so many different other things. It's actually very scary and sad to see. But this is what I mean. Are you going to submit to the state? Are you going to submit to fantasy? Are you going to submit to this mental prison that's out there, this ideology that's designed to rob you of your individuality and of your divinity? Or are you going to rediscover that? and figure out who you are in the face of all of this. Netflix doesn't want you to have kids. If you're in Georgia, Netflix doesn't want you to have kids. And that to me is a crazy, crazy reality that we find ourselves in. But what's going to happen, speaking of kids and speaking of all of this craziness, we're going to take a quick break and play for you guys a break, some cool music, so we can ease out, mellow into what we're going to talk about here in this next segment. But what we're going to talk about when we come back is the migrant crisis, climate change, and globalism. Speaking of the kids that are here, you have people like Greta Thunberg, who is the poster child for the climate change agenda, for the climate crisis agenda that is sweeping Europe. You have this whole climate agenda being put out there, ushered in by kids. They're telling you to stop having kids. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, stop having kids if you care about the earth. NBC says, is having kids ethical for the planet? And with the kids that are here, you see them being politicized. But like I said, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the immigration invasion. The immigration invasion. Los Angeles launching its own Green New Deal, the climate crisis madness, and what's going on with our own country. Apparently nearly 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is owned by foreigners. What's going on with that? I don't know, but we'll talk about this and more on the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. This is Freedom Faction on Factions of Freedom, and we'll be right back right after this. Salutations, my friends. I'm here to talk to you about, that's right, CBD oil. CBD oil can reduce the risk of relapse among alcohol and cocaine addicts, and they're trying to flood us with both. According to a 2013 study published in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology, CBD was proven to have these benefits: relieving pain and inflammation, having antipsychotic effects, reducing anxiety, helping to fight cancer, relieving nausea, treating seizures, lowering incidences of diabetes, and also promoting cardiovascular health. Realize that in 2014, Purdue Pharma received FDA approval for an opioid drug that claimed to help curb the opioid addiction. This will actually help you curb your usage of opioids as well as your reliance upon them. And remember, guys and gals, stay vigilant. Those lives we share truth. This is Freedom Faction out. Whoa! That's right. We're still here. And I do wonder for how long. We need to create more redundancies. You can never have enough plans. Well, you can if you can't finance them and if you can't have them operate and integrate appropriately. Then you can have too many plans. But hey, thank you, gang, for sticking around. Glad to see or hear I didn't scare you. Now, when being confronted with the unknown, I think the best thing to do is to hold your breath and stare at it deep. But not too long. Don't let the fear get you. It's the apprehension. It's the tension. It's where time feels like it stands on its head. Where the air is more palpable than sand. Just messing with you. Thank you guys for being here. Yeah, we got a lot of things going on. This segment we're talking about the fangs of globalism and how they're just rearing their ugly head. I had meant to talk about this in the previous segment. I had asked you guys a question in our Instagram story of whether or not you think two things. One, has America embraced a death cult? Or two, have the psychopaths in power just revealed who they truly are? Have they just ripped off the mask? The fangs of globalism, what we see happening now, the migrant crisis, climate change, the taking over of our politics, of our ideology, the socioeconomic reformation. We're seeing them slowly sink in. I say this all the time. Be as American as you can for as long as you can, because you see them taking that. In the future, the same way with Prohibition, they had speakeasies and back alley bars where people used to go there and get drunk. In the future, they're going to have speakeasies and back alley places where people could go be American, where they can go throw bales of hay, to where they can wear, something that's classic Americana. Because what's happening now is the multicultural agenda, is the creation of the one world government, of this new world order, of the global citizen. I try to talk about this in so many different ways and so many different perspectives, with so many different guests, so that people understand what's going on. Now, I'm going to start talking about the migrant crisis, because I'm here in New Mexico. I want to go ahead and say that you guys can download, that I have a downloadable PDF attached to this episode. What's going to happen is you go to our website, factionsofreedom.jimdo.com, and download the PDF that's attached to this episode. You won't find it on our audio podcast feed in that description bar below. I may put a link there, but your best bet is to go to our actual website, download the PDF, and what you can see once you're there is from at least November of 2018 up until May of 2019. I have archived all of the incidences that have taken place, and it shows how the migrants are here, how we have been infiltrated. Like here, let me see if I can just, because I don't have it pulled up right now, let me see if I can just pull up some of the incidences that have happened, because we have to put this together in relation to the footage that we got when we went down to the border. Right here, November 26th, 2018, the migrants breached the southern border. The day after, the 27th, DHS security. Migrants use children as human shields. And that very same day, at least 15 known terrorists have been arrested trying to jump the border. Let's just scroll down to, let's say January. It says January 2nd, 2019, U.S. Border Patrol hits women, children in Mexico with tear gas. January 17th, new caravan with hundreds of migrants departs Honduras for USA. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Let's go down here to April. Let's see. Sure. April 12th, Trump threatens to dump migrants in sanctuary cities. April 15th, sleeper cells. 10,000 illegal aliens from terrorist nations roam free in the USA. So yeah, I'm going to put that link in the description bar below on our website so you guys can download that, because when I'm making all of these statements, it's coming from that point of view. You see, it's coming from the point of view of, like, I'm doing the research, I'm investigating this, I'm seeing it increase. And what's crazy too is I just noticed this is kind of like a secondary thing. I have at least 14 or 15 different observations that have taken place alongside the chronicling of this that show not only the gradual degradation that's taking place in society, but the mindset of these types of people, and so many different types of things and more. This is a very, very real crisis. at our border. Okay, and there's information coming out now how they're being shipped to San Diego, Denver, Florida, New York, all over the place. Okay, and that's why here, being in New Mexico, I have a very, very unique perspective that needs to be explained everywhere else out there. Okay, and so you have people who are legally getting in, who are being sponsored and dropped off in certain locations, and then you have the swaths of people who are just being released here, brought in here, who are being funneled in and trafficked. That's the crazy thing about this. It is very complex, and that's why it requires attention, and that's why people are calling it invasion, is because it's just unruly. No one knows what's going on there, and because nobody's taking the time to really look at this. That we get caught up in our emotions. We don't look at what's happening. What I had wanted to do with that immigration invasion downloadable PDF is go back to the UN Migration Pact, whenever the UN made it a human right for people to be able to migrate, and at the same time considered it hate speech if you began to chastise these individuals. I wanted to take that timeline back there and just show how this is an organized agenda, how people such as George Soros and MasterCard as well, they finance this. They're giving these people money to literally go and travel to different places. This is what I mean by the multicultural agenda. This is what I mean by bringing us down to a third world nation status, the socioeconomic reformation. What do you think happens whenever you import the third world? You can only, say we're a first world country, sure, let's say that. What happens when we import the third world? Well, clearly we would go down to at least like the second world, you see, and that's where we're at right now. We're fighting for what values we have as we embrace this national global culture that's not necessarily infecting, but taking over the entire planet. This is what Pope Francis is talking about. This is why he asked for a supranational world order to enforce the climate change agenda and things of this nature. Because this is here. Let me just play this clip for you guys real quick, just so we can get this on the record as well. They spent, what was it? It was 1.57 billion to build 20 miles of border, and now here in New Mexico, you have a mayor saying, we don't want you to build that border wall on private land because it's too high. It's too high. We don't want it to be, what was it? I think 12 feet tall. It's got to be 6 feet tall. So now you're having private individuals trying to build something on private land, and the government getting involved, trying to disrupt it. But here, let me play for you guys this clip.
here to talk a little bit about what we've learned about the intentions
Let's
of
take a
Border
listen.
Patrol.
I hope that was all going.
Earlier this week, the chief of Border Patrol operations out of Miami informed us that their intentions were to bring about 1,000 people every month up into the Broward and Palm Beach County area, 500 to each county, and that these people were going to be brought from the El Paso area that have crossed the border illegally. The composition, according to what we were told, was supposed to be family units, so we don't know what that means. We don't know if that means a 15-year-old, a mother and a father, or a 5-year-old and a mother, or just a father and a child. We don't know what the composition of a family unit meant. The questions that we had, because we believe this is a public safety issue, is, what kind of health conditions do they have?
Yep.
Even though they've had a minor physical exam. We're here to talk a little bit about what we've
and
learned about.
That's what one of my sources was saying as well. Whenever they take them to the or to the hotels, they have a doctor that shows up at the hotel, checks on them, gives them like a minor examination to see if there's any discoloration of the skin, if there's any signs of like sicknesses or diseases. And this is also another fact that goes widely unreported in mainstream media as well. How some of the Border Patrol agents are actually catching some of the diseases that are coming over with these migrants. Just this week, the man that was giving food to migrants out there in the deserts, I think, of Arizona, he's actually going to trial and facing 20 years for giving water to the migrants that are illegally coming through. So this is what I mean by some of the lawlessness that's taking place and how everything right now is kind of ambiguous, you see.
This is really a somber moment for us as we go to trial today. Scott is being prosecuted for, as you mentioned, providing food, water, clean clothes, and beds to 2 people who asked him for help. So what we've seen in No More Deaths recently is really an escalation of a longstanding war on the lives of undocumented migrants and undocumented communities in this country. The crisis of deaths and disappearances on the border has been ongoing. There's more than 7,000 known deaths in the last 2 decades, and as Scott said, that's a vast undercounting of the true number of people who have died or gone missing. But what we've really seen in the last several years is a ramping up of attacks, not only directly on the lives of undocumented people crossing through the border, but also on those who make it their work to stop and help people and try to prevent these deaths and suffering. And that's not only this.
Interesting. This is what I mean by like this ambiguous period that we're in. It's like this guy's doing the very same thing that the government's doing, but because he didn't go through the proper channels, like he's about to get penalized for it. And that to me is just the craziest thing about it. They want you to pay more attention to the migrants instead of the residents. And this is what I mean by the inverted clown world that we find ourselves living in. So let's talk about this. Why are these people leaving? We constantly ask the question of where are these people coming from? I think there was a poll out just the other day, or a survey that took place, to where they said 40% of the UK is actually not native, not born there, as in like people are being imported from Europe, the Middle East, and all over, and so they're literally overwhelming like the UK that is there. I've talked just the other week, about how there are terrorist training camps out here in New Mexico as well as Alabama. But I digress. That's the political domestic terror reason as to why these people would come here, because as George Bush said, George Bush Jr., they hate us for our freedoms. That's the political reason. But what is the other reason as to why they would come here? Because they can take advantage of our welfare system. They can take advantage of our educational system, our political system, and so much more. What I'm really trying to get around to saying is what we're seeing is the creation of the global citizen, the migrant, the forever impoverished, the forever displaced. You see, the citizen of the global world order. If you don't like where you're at, you can go someplace else. But you can never have identity. You can never have nationality. You can never have a home. You will forever be a renter from the state, a ward of the one world religion. What this is climate change. You've heard people talk about it. Former governor of California, Jerry Brown, and even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about how climate change will be one of the primary factors for the displacement of people in the future. that they will leave areas where they are uninhabitable, and they'll obviously travel to places that are habitable, i.e. America or any other industrialized nation that can handle them. They'll go there for the work, right? Is that not what these people are doing? The middle-aged men that we heard about 2 or 3 years ago, well, they're asking for their kids now. You see, they figured out how to come in here, take advantage of the system, get on welfare, and create a system for themselves that was better than wherever they were from before. This is that global communism, this global socialism that is taking place. And we'll have to do more discussions of this in the future. But right here, an interesting article popped up that alludes to what I'm talking about in the future. So keep this in mind when we're talking about the climate change, the mass immigration, and everything else that's taking place. They want to take the dollars of the taxpayers and then essentially exalt and put these migrants up on a pedestal. We're going to pay for the migrants to have everything from health care to education to housing, you name it. But right here, this article from Max Lavo of SHTF Plan, we put this up May 23rd. It says, young people are increasingly blaming climate change for not saving for retirement, as if prices are going up. Meat prices are going up. Gas prices are going up. Housing is going up. Cost of living is going up. There's an article that came out today where people are literally going into debt for paying for bare necessities. Americans are literally living paycheck to paycheck. This is a very, very dangerous time period that we are in. If there was enough interest, I don't even care if there is interest. I think I might have to do this out of necessity for the future, but to have more of these conscious entrepreneurs on to talk to you, the audience, about effective ways to getting out of the system, because this is we're heading for a financial collapse. I think everybody can see it. This is why cryptocurrency is so important. This is why all of the stuff regarding finance and the economy is so important. We're on a bubble, and it's going to blow eventually. I mean, don't even get me started on the big banks. But let me get into this article. It says, an increasing number of younger Americans are blaming climate change for not putting away money for their own retirement. They say that's because the world won't exist when they retire because of climate change, and so there's no need to save any money anyway. But if we apply that logic to everything, there is never a need to prepare for the future of anything, and the liberal ideology crumbles upon itself. MarketWatch used a young professional as an example of this flawed thinking. Lori Rodriguez, a 27-year-old communications professional in New York City, insists or is not saving for retirement, and it is not isn't necessarily because she can't afford to, but because she doesn't expect it to matter. Like many people her age, Rodriguez is brought into the propaganda and religiously believes that climate change will have catastrophic effects on our planet. Some 88% of millennials, a higher percentage than any other age group, believe in the climate change religion, and 69% say it will impact them in their lifetimes. Quote, I want to hope for the best and plan for a future that is stable and secure, but when I look at the current events and at the world that we are predicting, I don't see how things could not be chaotic in 50 years, Rodriguez says. Quote, the weather systems are already off, and I don't think it's hyperbolic to be a little apocalyptic. The mainstream media isn't helping either. Using manipulation techniques, the media engulfs people in a constant barrage of depressing and hate-filled news stories, so much so that many young people are skeptical about saving for a future they're constantly being told won't exist. Just to clarify, for these younger people, in 2018, liberal hero Al Gore predicted that the world would that there would be no polar ice caps in 3 to 5 years because of global warming. However, the inconvenient truth is that the caps are still here today, over 10 years later. Interestingly enough, right after stating that younger Americans don't save for retirement because they believe climate change will destroy the world, MarketWatch clarified that mental health could also be an issue. I have to laugh a little bit at that, but they're right. You know, this is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is promoting by saying, should we have kids for the earth? Should you stop having kids to save the planet? There's a whole movement out there for it. Birth strikers is a legit thing. This climate change religion is is a huge thing. This is what I mean by the one world religion, where we're talking about consumption, production, recycling, what each individual can do. You know, they say that having a child is possibly one of the worst things that you could do to the planet. I'm like, that's demonic, that's evil. But this is that anti-human agenda that's being pushed. It's a pro-earth, anti-human agenda. You see, this is it. But to get back to this, climate change, retirement, the millennial mindset, mental health, and so much more, They want to turn us into permanent renters. They don't want us to have a sense of value, of worth, of individuality, to where we can say, hey, you know, my family came from this region of the world. They did this. They don't want you to have lineage, legacy in history, because that emboldens you. No, they want you to be a forever borrower. This is why debt is so. This is why debt is through the roof. And we've spoken on this a few weeks ago too. Of how this whole living paycheck to paycheck mindset, how it does affect the mental health of the individual after a while. You know, you could even look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how eventually finance becomes like a huge thing. But this is another discussion for another day. What I'm trying to illustrate is how climate change is slowly leading into how we perceive things, you see, and how it's affecting everybody. People not saving because they don't think they'll have a future. People not having children because they think that the world will be bad. You know, there's so much to go with just right there. Really, it is. But to further talk about the climate madness and the chaos surrounding the climate change religion, check this out right here from Sound of the Times. Climate crises madness. Girl reportedly bullied by teacher and classmates for refusing to participate in the climate strike. And for people who don't know what the climate strike is, it's essentially that. Kids that are leaving school to protest protest against climate change and global warming. Before getting into this article, this is what I meant by the fangs of globalism, using children to get out the agenda. With David Hogg, that's what they're doing with gun control. With Desmond is amazing. That's what they're doing with the LGBTQP movement. And with Greta Thunberg, that's what they're doing with the climate crisis agenda. This is what I mean. They want to be able to disarm the public so that we can't fight back. They want to be able to it's Greta Thunberg, it's David Hogg. They want to be able to sexualize the children so that they won't be an issue in the future, that they'll just be so confused and devastated after being molested that they won't want to be able to discover who they truly are and fight their real perpetrators. And at the same time, they want to keep you distracted and misappropriated on the actual issues. There's so many different things to look at with just those key figures. If you thought Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was bad and what she's doing for these narratives, well, we can't debate children because, well, they're kids. But also another thing to speak on in relation to this, I made this correlation as well a few weeks back. You know, when these kids are leaving school, they're essentially leaving one indoctrination to choose to be radicalized by another. I hope that made sense. So with the Desmond is amazing analogy, where they have kids being hypersexualized in school, they're choosing that hypersexualization in school. But with the climate strike kids leaving school and protesting climate change, well, hold on now. Who's telling these kids that they won't have a future? Where are they learning this if they're not in school? You see, they're leaving one indoctrination for another. They're choosing to align with this. But let me get into this. We put this up May 23rd. It's by Sound of the Times. It says, a Swedish girl who refused to join her classmates in skipping school for the sake of the climate has ended up being labeled as a climate denier, which her mother described as a mass psychosis. A high school pupil who has refused to attend a so-called school strike for climate has been bullied not only by her classmates, but by the teacher as well, the magazine Det Goda Samhället reported. When the girl's classmates decided to join the climate strike, spearheaded by teenage activist turned superstar Greta Thunberg, Sana declared she didn't want to attend and was giving a tongue lashing from the teacher. The teacher said Sana was uncommitted and failed to understand the seriousness of the climate threat. So hold on. You're not committed, Sana. You don't care about the earth, Sana. She's like, no, I just want like an education. I'm really not here for the politics. It's like, no, Sana, I'm not going to teach you today. Get out there on those streets and protest for the earth. She's like, look, ma'am, I'm really okay. Can I just go to the library and read my book and then you guys can? No, you're not committed, Sana. You must not understand the seriousness of the climate threat, Sana. You see how that works? How you are the mentally ill one because you have an idea and you don't want to join the protest. You just want to go do your own thing. Let me continue on. It says she asked her to reconsider her decision and she said it openly for the entire class to hear. Sana felt like the teacher was trying to ridicule her in front of the others. Lena, the girl's mother, told Det Goda Samlat, because of the teacher's actions, the rest of the class also turned against Sana, who ended up being boycotted by her own friends and accused of being a climate denier, Lena recalled. So whenever a few years ago, whenever I was putting together the Building the Matrix documentary, I had talked about how people like myself, you already see this happening with the vegan activists, the eco-fascists that are out there condemning and chastising American values, eating meat, babes in bikinis, fast cars, outdoor lifestyles, throwing axes, kicking butt, and doing all kinds of other stuff. You see them already criminalizing this type of behavior. They just called Sana a climate denier for not wanting to participate in the protest. They didn't ask her whether or not she believed in climate change, whether or not she even paid attention. Nope, you're a climate denier because you're not going along with the agenda. You're not going along with the program. Continuing on, it says, when the mother called the school's administration, she herself was questioned by the female principal. Quote, she said it was sad that Sana went against the rest of the class and refused to participate in something this positive. I could read between the lines that she thought I had a wrong attitude myself, Lena explained. The mother called the situation a mass psychosis and said it was very unpleasant. If you're not a friend of Greta Thunberg and her school strikes for the sake of the climate, then you should be boycotted and bullied. This is totally sick, the mother explained. According to her, Sana now refuses to go to school. She is worried and afraid of what may happen. Greta Thunberg is a Swedish climate activist who rose to the international flame for her weekly school strikes held outside of the Swedish parliament. And as her movement rose to the prominence, hundreds of thousands of students in over 100 countries across the globe have followed her example. Now, there's so many different things to look at there. What I'm really trying to say is they're criminalizing the idea that this girl doesn't want to do what everybody else is doing. I'm not saying that I don't believe in climate change. I'm not saying that what these kids are doing isn't courageous, getting politically active right off the bat. But what happens whenever we have to literally chastise the individual for doing this, having their own thoughts? Like, that's the dangerous part about that. The fact that these kids can be wrapped up in this whole psychosis, wrapped up in this fever, essentially, and saying, look, we're not going to let this person have their own thought. They don't think like us. They are the problem. A climate denier. I always ask the question, well, what about HARP? What about geoengineering, cloud seeding, chemtrails? Bill Gates is teaming up with Harvard to spray carbon dioxide over cities. Former disgraced CIA Director John Brennan talks about stratospheric aerosol injections and how that's his preferred method to combating the climate. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again, but is that introduced in climate change? And what happens whenever this person who could eventually look at this type of stuff gets turned off by the whole idea because of the social engineering and the peer pressure that's there? They've got the kids. These are children who are still learning things, and they've already been radicalized and joining this mob mentality. This is rule by demons. That's democracy, to where these children have been incepted with ideas that aren't their own. You see, and what happens? Because we got to start wrapping stuff up for this fantastic episode. What happens when you start asking the deeper questions about, well, what is climate change? What does this mean? What's all going on? No one ever asks that. It's either do you believe climate change or not? They're like and this is the crazy part about it too. They say it's all coming from a place of love and light. We care about the earth, but we don't care about you. Kill yourself if you love the earth. It's like, why don't you? But check this out. This is something I think will be pivotal in understanding the mindset of the globalist, the mindset of where we will move into the future, the global citizen, the UN Migration Pact, and so much more. This is something I did not know, and I think will blow your mind. Nearly 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is now owned by foreigners. 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is owned by foreigners. 30 million acres. I have an article that comes up after this where just in Atlanta, and just think about this correlation. In Atlanta or Alabama, they're going to transform 7 acres of vacant land into the country's largest food forest. So not 7 million acres, only 7 acres. 7 acres versus 30 billion. Or 30 million. 7 versus 30 million. 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is now owned by foreigners. This is an article by Michael Snyder from Sons of Liberty Media. We put this up May 28th. It says all across America, U.S. farmland is being gobbled up by foreign interests. So when we refer to the heartland of America, the truth is the vast stretches of that, quote, heartland is now owned by foreigners. And most Americans have no idea that this is happening. These days, a lot of people are warning about the globalization of the world economy, but in reality, our own soil is rapidly being globalized. When farmers are locally owned, the revenue that those farms take in tends to stay in local communities. But with foreign-owned farms, there is no guarantee that that will happen. And while there is plenty of food to go around, this is not a major concern. But what happens when a food crisis erupts and these foreign-owned farms just keep sending their produce out of the country? There are very serious national security concerns here, and they really aren't being addressed. Instead, the amount of farmland owned by foreigners just continues to increase with each passing year. Prior to seeing the headline, this article, how much U.S. farmland would you have suggested that foreigners own? Personally, I had no idea that foreigners nearly owned 30 million acres. And the following comes from NPR. NPR, American soil. Those are two words that are commonly used to stir up patriotic feelings. They are also words that could be taken for granted, because today nearly 30 million acres of U.S. farmland are held by foreign investors. That number has doubled in the past for 2 decades, which is alarming, which is raising alarm bells in farming communities. How do we allow this to happen? And actually, laws regarding land ownership vary greatly from state to state. Some states have placed strict restrictions on foreign land ownership, while in other states it is a free-for-all. Texas is a kind of free-for-all state, so they kind of don't have a limit on how much land can be owned, says Ohio Farm Bureau Ty Higgins. You look at Iowa and they restrict it. No land in Iowa is owned by a foreign entity. Ohio, like Texas, also has no restrictions, and nearly 500,000 acres of prime farmland are held by foreign-owned entities. So think about that. 30 million acres of U.S. farmland is owned by foreigners. Don't hear Trump talk about that. Don't hear that being made good. But here, thank the Lord, here in Atlanta, not Alabama, but here in Atlanta, you have them trying to at least do something about this to regain some level of national pride. They're trying to transform 7 acres of a vacant land into the country's largest free food forest. Thank the Lord. This is an article by Emma Fiala of the Anti-Media. We put this up May 28th. It says Atlanta City Council just voted in favor of transforming over 7 acres of vacant property into the state of Georgia's first food forest. The measure, which paves the way for the largest food forest in the county, or in the country, according to Councilwoman Carla Smith, was approved last Monday after a unanimous vote. So think about that. Climate change, 30 million acres of our farmland isn't even ours, but we have to grow our own food here. Like, this is what I mean by climate immigration, invasion, the mass migration, and all this other stuff. This is stuff that we need to talk about. Truly, where our is Atlanta being subject to climate change? Is this the appropriate place to have the country's, the nation's largest food forest? Can they distribute that evenly along the eastern seaboard? Can they distribute that along into the rest of the country? You see, this is real climate change. Bill Nye was talking about a few weeks ago, talking about how the Earth is heating up and things of this nature. Well, you don't hear a lot of people talking about what's required to get us back online. Yeah, we're aware of the problems, but this is one of the very few times that we're beginning to talk about solutions. China and Japan are actually working on vertical forests because they understand it. I think Italy is as well, because they understand that that's a huge thing. Urban gardening is a huge thing. But what we're beginning to see is, yes, we're in the age of man. This is the anthropogenic climate change. We do affect the climate. We do affect the earth. But what does this mean? If this food, just just talking about the previous article right there, if the food that we're making or that we're growing here in our own country is being exported elsewhere, what do we have to say for ourselves? What do we have to show for ourselves? Let me read this article and then I'll finish this up talking about Los Angeles launching their own Green New Deal. It says the urban food forest will be available free of charge and will include edible trees, shrubs, and vines in addition to traditional community gardens beds, as well as walking trails, public gathering spaces, and other features. Quote, "It's just like going into a park and picking muscadines from a bush," Smith said. The land, currently owned by environmental agency, the Conservation Fund, will be sold to the city of Atlanta for, what is that, $150,000? That's pretty good. The agency was in possession of the land after it was abandoned due to a failed business venture. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the urban food forest at Brown Mills has been in the works since November 2016, when the city accepted a $86,000 grant from the U.S. Forest Service Community Forest and Open Space Program. Atlanta's Department of Parks and Recreation will oversee the property, and Trees Atlanta will maintain the urban food forest. Trees Atlanta has secured a $121,000 in funding and plans to employ 2 part-time workers, including a forest ranger and a community workforce educator. Plans for the urban food forest conform to the city's goal to strengthen local food economy to ensure 85% of the city residents are within 1/2 mile of fresh food access by 2021, Agenda 21. According to the measure, parks, green space, and recreation are an integral part of the fabric of the city of Atlanta. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 36% of Atlanta was classified as a food desert in 2017, and a quarter of the city's residents must travel more than 1/2 mile to purchase fresh produce. Hopefully, Atlanta will be the first of many cities pushing for legislation that focuses on the well-being of their residents and transitions vacant lands into productive spaces that benefit the people. Yeah, we can only hope that those types of things happen. And if you ask me, this is good, because what we're moving into now is sustainable development, sustainable technology. How do we start healing the planet? How do we start undoing some of the damage that has been done? How do we live in harmony? You know, not to take anything away from the Georgia Guidestones, but how do we live in harmony with the planet?
Here, I've got an experiment for you. Safety glasses on. By the end of this century, if emissions keep rising, the average temperature on Earth could go up another 4 to 8 degrees. What I'm saying is the planet's on fucking fire. There are a lot of things we could do to put it out. Are any of them free? No, of course not. Nothing's free, you idiots. Grow the fuck up. You're not children anymore. I didn't mind explaining photosynthesis to you when you were 12, but you're adults now, and this is an actual crisis. Got it? Safety glasses off, motherfuckers.
Bill Nye talking about the Green New Deal. I feel like I just had to play that because what we're going to be talking about next to wrap this all up is just that. We're talking about the socioeconomic reformation. We're going to be talking about the Green New Deal and all of this stuff, man, because this is where we're at. The 2020 elections that are going to happen here in our country are going to be far out, man. They're going to be crazy. If you thought everything that we had been leading up to was well, no, it's literally just prepared you. But this is what I mean. People are getting fired up about the country, pun intended, and they're also seeing what's on the horizon. I think some of the major parties in the Brexit vote in the UK were the Greens, right? It was the Greens and the Conservatives, and that really made me start thinking about, well, what is this centrist model? What is this regionalist model that's being put out there? What's going to happen with globalism and nationalism? It's going to create regionalism. Well, what does that mean? What are some of the primary talking points that people care about these days? Well, we want to be able to conserve our money and reserve things, but we also care about the environment. You're going to have a lot more people, and I think this is what's going to happen, just speculation. This is the centrist that will grow, that'll be put out there. It'll be like a conservative environmentalist person who cares about the environment, but also cares about like the individual's rights and stuff like this. Don't quote me on this, but we'll see how this goes. But to pivot over here into this article, LA Mayor Eric Garcetti launches Green New Deal. This is by Los Angeles Mayor. Technocracy News put this up. We put this up May 24th. It says Los Angeles is aspiring to become a city-state unto itself as it honors the Paris Climate Agreement and creates its own Green New Deal, delivering, quote, environmental justice and equity through an inclusive green economy. Mayor Eric Garcetti today released Los Angeles's Green New Deal, which sets aggressive goals for the city's sustainable future, tackles the climate emergency with accelerated targets, strengthens our economy and our middle class, and sets LA on course to be carbon neutral by 2050. Quote, politicians in Washington don't have to look across the aisles of Congress to know what a Green New Deal is. They can look across the country to Los Angeles, said Mayor Eric Garcetti. Quote, with flames on our hillsides and floods in our streets, cities cannot wait another moment to confront the climate crisis and everything we've got. LA is leading the charge with a clear vision for protecting the environment and making our economy work for everyone. LA's Green New Deal is guided by 4 key principles: a commitment to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement, a promise to deliver environmental justice and equity through an inclusive green economy, a plan to ensure every Angelino, every Los Angelino has the ability to join the green economy by creating pipelines to good-paying green jobs and determination to, by example, within city government, showing the world what an urban Green New Deal looks like in practice. So I'm just gonna rapid fire through some of the things here that they have discussed. The Green New Deal leads with bold new action to zero out Los Angeles' main sources of harmful emissions: building, transportation, electricity, and trash. Our accelerated goals and new targets include building a zero carbon electricity grid, creating a jobs cabinet to bring city, labor, educational, and business leaders together, mandating that all new municipality-owned buildings and major renovations to be all electric, achieving a zero waste future by phasing out styrofoam by 2021, recycling 100% of our wastewater by 2035, sourcing 70% of our water locally, and planting and maintaining at least 90,000 trees, which will provide 61 million square feet of shade citywide by 2021. So essentially what we're seeing right now is just that. If you guys want to go read more about that, you can do so on our page. But essentially what we're talking about is just that: socioeconomic reformation, the paradigm shift. What happens whenever we're really looking at transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy? I've spoken about this in so many different ways and more, and I'm sure I will in the future. However, I wanted just to leave it off with that. This is the fangs of globalism. This is what I mean. They're releasing the migrants here into our country so that we are forced to talk about what happens whenever we are lowered down to a general setting, just like everybody else. This is what I mean by global communism, global socialism. This is the New World Order, and this is all I really have for you guys and gals. I hope I was able to thoroughly explain things in this transmission. However, that's it. And this is Bilderberg in Action, American Death Cult, and the Fangs of Globalism. Whoa. However, like I said, that's all I really have for you guys. Seems like these episodes are getting kind of long, but it's because I'm taking the time to put the effort into them. I hope you guys download the downloadable PDF for the immigration invasion to get a better view instead of the rapid fire way. Get a comprehensive view of what's going on with the migrant crisis. A few little outro updates for you guys. Like I said before, we are shutting down for season 8. There will be no Fellowship in Freedom, and there are still slots available for the November trip to Bali, Indonesia. That's all I really can say. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of history, and thank you for standing right here with me as we build up an effective weapon system against all this misinformation, against the war on consciousness. However, that's all I really have for you guys and gals. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And as always, guys and gals, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noisera, Freedom Faction, out.